And we are live. All right, welcome everybody to Marshall Way Network. This is episode 7. And for those of you that are just joining us today, specifically, we're going to be talking about sparring. We're shaking it up a little bit on the Marshall Way Network. I know we've been on hiatus for about 2 weeks as we had some other things going on. But today we're going to be doing a lively discussion, just kind of going around here with the martial artists that are with me today and discussing sparring, what's working, what's not working, what's missing from today's traditional martial arts fighters, and what does the future look like, or where would we like to see the future of sparring go in regards to martial arts. So let me do some quick introductions here, and then we'll get started on the discussion. All right, with us tonight we have Mr. Rose. He's the one down there with the nice shaved head for a recent fundraiser that he did, and awesome martial artist. He is a second degree in Taekwondo, and he is the owner and chief instructor at Peaceful Warriors Martial Arts in Newcastle, Oklahoma. Also with us this evening is Dr. Ronald Leach, a retired dentist, and he has a number of different ranks and styles that he studied. 9th Dan in Shorin-ryu, 9th Dan in Taekwondo, 6th Dan in Shurate, 4th Dan in Kenjutsu and Iajutsu, and a 3rd Dan in Kyokushinkai. And he is a master instructor at Branson Karate in Branson, Missouri. And myself, my name is Vishan Borich, and I am also an instructor. I'm a 5th Dan in Shorin-ryu, 5th Dan in Kyokushinkai, and I am the owner and instructor at Branson Karate in Branson, Missouri. And we may have some others joining us, and when we do, I'll be sure to introduce them. In the meantime, we're going to go ahead and get started. Be sure, if you're watching tonight's episode, you can participate live. If you're watching a recording, you can still comment below, but we would love your feedback if you're on here tonight on the live show. Just click on the buttons below, and you'll be able to log in and make comments, and as we see those coming through, we will go ahead and announce them or answer your questions. So get involved. We would love your feedback. All right, so Mr. Rose, let's get us started off here. Let's talk about sparring. What do you think about sparring in today's world?
All right, yes, ma'am. Well, in some ways, we really have come a long way, in my opinion, in a lot of ways when it comes to sparring, such as our new types of safety gear. Really in looking at the safety of the people involved. We've come a long way when it comes to the types of gear, and I think Mr. Osborne pointed out in one of our episodes the arrival of the athletic martial artist, or the martial arts athlete, and I think that's actually done a lot of good for our sport. But what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to talk about a couple of different things, and then you guys can throw in, say however you feel on the subject, agree, disagree, doesn't bother me a bit. But I think in some ways to move forward, let's talk about competition for a minute. I think in some ways to move forward in a competition standpoint or a competitive sense, we're going to have to almost take a step backward in a way. And I know that point sparring has been around for a long time, but I remember coming up, and point sparring wasn't the thing I stayed to watch the black belts do. It wasn't what I stayed to see. It wasn't the big showcase thing for me, but that's kind of become that way now. And there's nothing wrong with point sparring. Personally, I think it's a great game to play. It helps you with speed and fast reactions and things like that. But I still feel like it does lack some things too. And I am one that I always like to watch the continuous divisions, or the semi-contact kickboxing divisions, or even, we call it semi-contact. Those guys went kind of hard though. But I always enjoyed watching those continuous divisions. It showed a different level of athlete to me. Not someone who just knew how to get in, but someone who knew how to get in and dominate, or knew how to get in and get out. It wasn't just the tactics of getting the point. It was the tactics of being able to control your space. And to me, especially when we're talking about using martial arts in the sense that it is a confidence builder and boosting awareness and boosting ability to defend oneself, I think it's important that we don't hammer in the point too much that, oh, you get contact and the fight is going to stop. You get one good solid hit and it's over. And sometimes that's the case, but we all know that a lot of times that's not really how it happens. And I think the continuous matches really give a better a better concept of being able to take a hit and come back from it, about the timing and rhythm and flow of a fight or of battle. Because just like in all things, I'm a big music fan. I always have been. I played music in junior high, high school. I was a trombone player. But you really see it in fighting too. There's a rhythm to it. There's timing to everything that you do. And it's not just your own rhythm involved. It's the rhythm of the other people in the fight, in the competition, in whatever the case is, their rhythm as well, which may or may not match out with yours. You know, your job is to know your rhythm, be able to tell what their rhythm is, and be able to break their rhythm. And sometimes you do sacrifice taking a light hit, maybe in the chest or here and there, to be able to then dominate from that point on. Well, it's not something you're really allowed to do in the point sparring game. A lot of times that light hit, that's the end of that segment, and then you reset and you start again. So I think when it comes to competition, I do love point sparring. I'm not talking down point sparring. But I think when it comes to competition, I think it's really important that maybe we take a step back. We have all these new safety, all this new type of safety gear, all this new safety stuff to help with the safety of our competitors. Plus, as martial artists, we all know that ego really has no place in the ring anyway. But I think that continuous sparring, being able to do it at competition, I know a lot of us do it at our schools anyway, even if we just go to competition and point spar, or I know a lot of schools like ours do different things too, like we'll do some Olympic style, we'll do some Kyokushin, but neither one of those allow punches to the head. And the old continuous sparring, the old semi-contact kickboxing, that did allow the punches to the head as well as kicks to the body and head, in my opinion, kind of gave you a new sense of how things worked, and it really put different kinds of pressure on you than point sparring does. It adds that pressure of that adrenaline rush, that pressure of being really pursued and sought after, and no one's going to call stop and just let you set back up. You get trapped in the corner, you got to find your own way out, and that's a little bit heading more to a realistic scenario. And I just think in competition, or being able to have it in competition, would be a good thing, so that people get to come around and do it with different people of their own rank, or different people with their own size. And this, I know there are competitions out there still do it, but a lot of times you only see it in black belts. I think it's important to be able to keep that stuff going, at least from intermediate on, if not from beginner on. My white belt spar from the beginning, continuous, point, lots of different ways, and I think it just helps build us as better athletes, better martial artists, and better able to understand and realize that what's coming our way and how to respond to what's coming our way without the scene just stopping every time. And that's just looking at it as far as competition. Like I say, I know some competitions still offer it. I still offer it at our Fight for a Cause tournament where I got my head shaved. We do that division, but there's a lot of competitions that have done away with it now. Now I understand there's issues with time restraints. Continuous sparring in competition does cause a lot of time restraint issues. But I did go to one tournament not long ago that offered it in the advanced belts and the black belts for 16-year-old and up. And how they did it really was a big time saver. They actually had a ring set aside that was just for the continuous matches. And while they started through the rings with the youngest groups, it filled all the rest of the rings up to the 16-year-old division. And at the same time they were starting, the 16-year-old divisions were starting in this other ring, doing their continuous sparring. So by the time their continuous sparring was done, their ring was opened up for their forms, competition, and everything else. And it really didn't imprint the time too much. And I know there's a lot of people around here where I'm at in Oklahoma that run their grappling that way and have grappling competitions. And I know every style is a little bit different, but when we're talking about martial arts, I'm a firm believer in learning as much as you can about as many different types of fighting as you can, whether it's joint lock and clinch or ground or stand up or whatever. I know I'm a Taekwondo artist, so by definition, I'm a stand-up guy, but I really enjoy my joint lock work and my ground work as well. But offering those type of things, just talking to promoters for a second, offering grappling or they used to do self-defense competitions, offering those kind of things in tournaments, I think helps bring more styles together. They're called open tournaments. We talk about bringing as many styles together as we can. You got to offer some things for the ground styles too, and they may see that and go, and they be watching the sparring and go, hey, I want to try that next time. And it just kind of allows an intermingling of different things that I think is really important for us as martial artists, as things blend together to meet and relate and exchange ideas, as well as to help each of our students expand into new horizons. Now that's talking about competition. I also wanted to bring up class sparring or practice sparring today because there are lots of different kinds. I learned lots of different kinds from many different schools that I attended. And I think I know a lot of people are good about this, but if you're at a school or you're teaching a school and you feel like maybe your sparring classes or your sparring times have gotten a little bit dull or it's always the same thing, there's lots and lots of ways to mix it up to gain all kinds of different sets of abilities to work. Me and Miss Borich were just discussing this towards our last episode, after our last episode, and again brought it up today. But a lot of people make fun of no contact sparring. They talk about it not being such a legitimate thing or any of that. But done in moderation or done from time to time, or it's just as part of your regular sparring routine, I actually find it as being kind of an important practice. Whether you do it in the form of, say, one steps, where some guy steps forward, takes a punch, block the punch, throw your techniques hard and fast, with the object of getting as close as you can to that person without touching them while they're standing still. That's a great way to start that with beginners. But then moving up into the intermediate advanced and being able to do free sparring in a non or very light contact capacity. Now, a lot of people, when they hear the term no contact, they think of two fighters that are 5 feet apart and they're just throwing things at random towards each other without any concept of hitting each other. And in my opinion, I have seen it done that way, don't get me wrong, but in my opinion, that's not what no contact sparring is about. No contact sparring, I always say, contact the blocks for sure. The idea is to get your strike as close to a legal contact surface as you can, or as close to a contact surface as you can, without actually quite making contact, but getting there unhindered, without a block or anything. So it's still hard, it's still fast, and stopping it on a dime, which teaches you a lot of muscle control and a lot of what I find is important to learn in forms too, the balance between when to be relaxed and when to show your power, the balance between relaxation and being powerful. And when you see two guys that are really experienced at this going at each other and they're moving super fast and they're literally stopping all these techniques right by the ear, right by the nose, or you can see the nose bend on the kick as it swings by in slow motion. That stuff is absolutely incredible to me. Plus, I think it helps with beginners. I mean, as long as they're with people who are experienced so they're not accidentally getting tagged. I think it really helps with beginners a lot with their courage and confidence to jump into the sparring ring when we do put the gear on, when we do contact, because they're used to seeing that stuff fly in front of them and they're not quite as scared. I think in a lot of cases I'm talking about kids here, but adults can be the same way. I've met many adults that are just a little bit timid to get in the ring, even with a kid. Simply because of that little bit of fear, that little bit of, I know what to do, but I'm a little overwhelmed at all this stuff flying in front of my face. And no contact sparring can be a great use for that. Plus, if you're one that's worried about using contact sparring for target areas that in most competitions are considered illegal, groin, inside, outside leg, even to the foot or to the back or kidneys or whatever, then no contact sparring is a great way to open up that discussion of other target areas that are still great target areas for defense that are not target areas that we go for in competition for safety reasons or whatever. And it gives a great excuse to bring up that discussion, whether you do it in one steps or you do it in free sparring. It's still a good way to bring that up. Of course, it also builds trust. If you're doing it with your students, it also builds trust between your students a lot, and it helps them to get closer and kind of create a closer training partner bond, in my opinion, when you can kind of build that type of trust with the other people you train with. Now, that's just one type. And then, of course, you have point sparring, which a lot of people do in their schools, and then there's the continuous sparring, which a lot of us do as well. And when it comes to that continuous sparring, we're talking about the contact sparring now. A lot of people always stick with those same rules you see in tournament, much the similar rules as semi-contact kickboxing, where, kicks above the belt, can go to the body, nothing to the back, can go to the head, kicks and punches to the head. Or, of course, if you're like a WTF-style Taekwondo school, even some ITF Taekwondo schools, then you have your Olympic-style training as well. And Olympic style is another, even if you're not a Taekwondo school, it's also another great teaching method. It's basically a way to learn to spar without much use of your arms and hands. It's a lot of leg work. So if you have someone that you really are trying to get more comfortable with using their legs or their kicks, even Olympic style sparring is a great way to go to try to work that in. But also, just because when you're in class, just because that's the way competition does it, doesn't mean that's the way you have to do it each and every time. for example, we just had a sparring class tonight, and all week I have been harping on seeing people throwing kicks without a hard enough reach chamber, without any real reach chamber at all in some cases. And so today when we had this sparring class, I opened it up. I said, hey guys, we're going to allow leg kicks, inside, outside thigh. We're going to allow sweeps, and we are going to allow leg catches. I'll allow you to catch the kick and do a sweep off of that with one finished move, and then you can allow them to get back up and continue on. And it really opened a lot of people's eyes. It adds a whole nother level to the fight when you actually are focused on not getting your kick caught. And then for those that, some of the kids particularly, that decided, oh, yeah, I can finally catch a kick, I'm going to try, they found out how difficult that can actually be when a technique is thrown really, really well, how hard that can really be. And I think it answered a lot of questions some of my students have been asking lately. And those are just a few different ways you can practice different types of sparring in your school. But my thing is to be open about it and to be willing to try different types of practice. For example, if maybe all your sparring practice, you never use leg kicks. I mean, I think we all know, anyone who's ever taken a leg kick knows, when it comes to defense, that leg kick can really hurt. And I don't mean just sting. It can make you like completely numb, really hard to stand, really hard to throw a kick from there. And you can always say, okay, well, today we're going to try to do some what they call semi-contact kyokushin, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. But you get the, where there is a lot of leg kicks, a lot of leg and body kicks, and a lot of body punches and things like that. But I think it's important to practice in as many different ways as possible so that you learn to open your brain up to the different levels of the fight. It's like my guys were talking about today. They never considered that fact that outside of the school, if they were to get into an altercation, that these might be some things that other people would try to use against them. Some grabs, some takedowns, some throws, some leg catches, stuff like that. And it really added a different level of thought, both on the offensive side and the defensive side of the sparring. So that was one thing I wanted to talk about. Basically, just what do you guys think about different types of class sparring? Do you do just one type? Do you try many different kinds? Do you ever just open up the rules for different situations? We did another drill in class today with the Baltimore things going on, talking about basically a riot or a mosh pit. We kind of created a false mosh pit, and we would take one person at random who no one else knew who that was, and it was that person's job simply to make it through the crowd from one end of the room to the other. And that was a real eye-opener, I think, for a lot of my students. I think that was a big eye-opener of a thing as well. So between just wanting to see, me personally, I'd like to see a little bit more continuous, a little bit more semi-contact kickboxing and competition just to open the world up. Maybe see grappling offered more in open tournament. And I will say one other thing, too. If you are interested in another type of sparring that's more synonymous with a particular style, like Olympic-style Taekwondo, contact a Taekwondo school. And you're not Taekwondo, contact a Taekwondo school nearby. They would be happy to have you come to their tournament and try it out with their guys. I can promise you that. There's lots of invitations go around and things like that. So what do you guys think?
Hey, I wanted to say something really quick before I hand it over to Dr. Leach, and that is, I really feel like at the tournaments that I've been at recently, I see on the registration forms that instead of sparring, one of the options is fighting. It doesn't actually say the word sparring, it says fighting. And to me, I think that there's a huge difference in the word sparring and fighting. If you look up the definition for fighting, fighting means you're displaying or engaging in violence, combat, or aggression. And to me, I mean, unless you're in a life or death situation, I don't think you need to go that far. Whereas sparring, it means that you're making the motions of boxing or the martial arts without actually landing heavy blows as a form of training. This is a type of free-form fighting with enough rules and customs or agreements to make injuries unlikely. And I think that we should, as a whole, as an industry in the traditional martial arts, I think we should really focus on sparring, no matter if it's continuous sparring or point sparring or whatever. I think we should actually call it sparring on all of our tournaments and definitely when we're speaking about it, because to me, fighting is a completely different mindset if we're using that term. That's just something I feel really strongly about. And the other thing I wanted to say is you were talking about different types of sparring. I came up in the Kyokushin lineage. That's where I started, and then I made the switch over to the Shorin-ryu style. In the Kyokushin lineage, we had 3 different types of sparring matches in every tournament. The first was no contact, and by no contact, that's absolutely none. And even when you blocked, you had to be very careful to try not to make contact. If you did, you could lose a point or you could be disqualified. Your whole goal here is to go through the motions of a match and come as close as possible without actually touching the opponent. And I tell you what, it taught me personally how to be a much more controlled sparrer than before I ever did that. It's a lot harder if you start off using contact to go to non-contact sparring. It's much easier and it's a better way to train, in my opinion, to go from no contact and get really, really good at that, and then start adding the contact, either the light contact, which was the second form that we offered in the Kyokushin, where you could touch, but you couldn't make a hard slap. If you made a hard slap, either with a strike or with a kick, then you would lose a point or be disqualified if it kept happening. So that was the light contact. And then we also had heavy contact. Heavy contact was optional, but I loved it personally. And for that one, we had to have full body protection and a grill for our helmet, because in Kyokushin we did allow punches and kicks to the head. So it was important that you protected your head. The only rules really for the heavy contact competition was we could not draw blood, knock them out, or cause any type of breakage, so any bone breakage or anything like that, or you were disqualified. But you could cause some bruising. Obviously, head rocks were okay. You could do takedowns, and if you took them down, you could do a strike. So I mean, it was hardcore, but it really taught you if your technique worked or not. You knew right away. When you get hit with something heavy, you know right away. But I tell you what, I would not have been a good heavy contact fighter had it not been for me learning no contact. So I wish that we could bring that back as a whole. If you're not doing it in your school, I highly recommend trying to do a no contact match, entirely no contact, and see how your students do. Because as they advance, especially at the black belt level, they should be able to do a full speed punch and kick without making any contact to their opponent. So it's something to try. It's going to challenge you. I know it will, but it really does make for a much better martial artist. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Leach now and see what his thoughts are on this topic of sparring.
Why don't you go ahead and finish? Can you hear me?
I can now. Yeah, go ahead.
You can hear me. Did you want to go ahead and finish?
Well, I was pretty much done for that part,
Okay.
but you go ahead if you had something to add to it.
Okay. All right. You hear me now? All right. When it comes to tournament fighting, it's something that I never really did. It was the nature of the program that I took. And of course, there's tournament sparring, fighting, cage fighting, the whole range of type of competition out there. But and it runs from no contact to light con to full contact. And I have some issues with some of the tournaments I've seen and been in. And that's generally that I've seen a lack of control on a lot of students, and most of them within the same schools. Also, some unethical activities, things like injuring an opponent when you're behind purposely, or knowing full well that you're going to lose a match or just teeing off on the opponent. That's another thing that happens. Master Boric talked about the beginning in full control. It also needs to be said that that particular tournament only allowed the younger students 3 techniques to use, and they had to use just those 3 techniques. So that it looks good, but it's not really sparring. It's just kicking and everybody knows what's coming. The act of sparring needs to be come off the top of your head and take the openings that you see, and it's totally random, and it needs to be random. Otherwise, you might as well do drills up and down the floor at each other. Some of the other things that I've seen happen are faking injuries. A student, when you see something that looks like contact to the head, they know they've been scored on, and they fall down and fake an injury. And I've seen people get kicked in the head and had their head rocked back and no injury. And people that get minimal contact and fall down in order to draw the point, I think it's a very bad situation. The purpose, to me, in sparring is to test what you know on a random basis. And when we sparred with a continuous time, there were no breaks, no calls of points. I knew when I got scored on, and I knew when I scored. It wasn't important that there was a winner or loser at the end of the match. The important thing that was there was that you went full time, and you used every technique you know. For the lower belts, there was no contact allowed, and I think this is important because there's not enough control. Even up to probably half to 3/4 of the way up the colored belt levels, the cube belt levels, there's some lack in control. When you get to green belt, your punches and kicks become dangerous, and if you haven't not yet developed that control, you are a danger, and therefore we can't let that kind of control out for the bag. So we have to have non-contact sparring at those levels. It's a must. Did I do something here? Yes, I did. The iCloud is coming up all over my screen. I can't see what I'm doing sometimes. Anyway, when you got to black belt, we sparred a little longer, and we were allowed controlled contact. Now, controlled contact is a full force kick that can touch the opponent, but it, like Master Borch was saying, it had to be controlled. She said no contact. I'm saying you can touch, and a full force punch or kick that pops the opponent's dobok but doesn't penetrate to the body is an excellently controlled kick or punch. We also allowed low kicks, and the reason for we didn't allow contact on those kicks, but the reason for allowing low kicks is that it requires you to protect the lower portion of your body. If you're out in the street and you're used to only kicking to the head, you will do as you're trained to do, and you will kick to the head. And you're going to get in trouble doing that, because there are people walking around like myself that will take you down with that kick to the head. And it's necessary to be able to block and to control yourself, but to block and take that person down if necessary. So we allowed low kicks that required your ability to protect your lower body as well as your upper body. We also allowed grappling. You get inside a person's kicking and punching range, you're now in the area of elbows and very short punches, knees, and those kinds of things. For that reason, we did wear knee pads. We did wear some padding along the long bones so that we didn't injure ourselves. But to that extent, it was only the cloth padding and very, very light. Throws were allowed, as I said. If you can get into your opponent and throw them through the ground, then you were allowed to pin them, or you were allowed to choke them out. Now, we did not allow people to be choked out. Okay, everybody knew when that choke was applied, and they knew I knew when I could not get out of a choke in enough time that I would tap out. That was simply the way things worked. And in this way, we were allowed to do a random, and I'm going to use fighting here instead of sparring, because we allowed the things to happen that could happen outside on the street, and the things that needed to be protected against, and the things that we needed to counter with on different techniques. So in that case, I look at sparring and fighting as one continuum, the way I grew up in the martial arts. It's peculiar to our school, but if we have a 2-minute match and you spar for 2 straight minutes and nobody stops you and you're kicking and punching and going the whole time, and you get into grappling and you're on the ground, that's extremely tiring, extremely tiring. So these are things that you see in the mixed martial arts, with the exception that we exhibited the control that those cage fighting matches don't have. They're out there to injure somebody. We're out here to practice and to show our ability and to test our ability and to have that random selection of techniques to throw or to have thrown at you. That's about all I have. I'll turn it back over to you, Master Boris.
All right. Thank you for that. I know that as a whole, there are some drills that you can do in order to get better at sparring, and I wanted to talk just about a couple of them that I've used in class that have helped me. I thought that might help you as well, for those of you that are into sparring. The first drill is one in which I've used in order to help with control, so that I can come within an inch of actually hitting somebody. The best way to do it, at least that I found, is I'll take some those little round stickers that you can get at an office supply store. I'll get some of those and I'll put the little circle stickers in the place where the chin, solar plexus, and groin are on a wall. I'll put those on a wall. Ideally, if you've got like a metal post or something that you can't dent, it's the best way, because your whole goal then is to practice your punches first and come as close as you can to that wall or post without actually touching it. And a few times you will hit it and you'll know it, but this is going to help you because you'll get better and better at that control. Once you've mastered it with your fist, then you're going to try to do it with kicks. And you're going to try different kicks, trying to hit within an inch of where those stickers are on the wall. Initially, if you really have not done any controlled work, I might recommend that you put those same stickers on a heavy bag and try it there. That way you have a little padding if you're having some trouble with your control. As you get better, then you can switch over to a wall or something like that. We do this in class, and I've noticed that with my students that have practiced this a lot, that they've gotten more and more controlled in how they spar. And that really does help. It not only helps with non-contact sparring, but then as it translates over into light contact or heavy contact, you have a better body awareness as to, are they the right distance from you? Are they too far? And you get better at sparring when you realize that, when you realize just how much it's going to take and to actually make contact. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I know a lot of people are probably wondering, well, hey, I've never practiced non-contact. How do I go about it? So hopefully that'll help you out. Mr. Rose, did you have anything else to add to tonight's discussion about sparring?
Yeah, I was trying to make some notes. And Miss Boris, that's how I learned how to do it. I went to a school that just used. I mean, we had an old piece of wood for the controlled contact, and at the school I was at that did that, or the no contact. And that's how I practiced it at home, was with an old pine tree. And I'll say you hit it a few times, barefoot, bare hand, and you won't want to hit it anymore. You get pretty good at it if you can stay with it through that bruising. Mr. Leach, or Dr. Leach, excuse me, you said a lot of great things in that, and it's been I would have loved coming up in a school like you were talking about, where everything is a little bit mixed. I'm kind of the same way. I always enjoy mixing the different things that are typically separated in competition and tournament, from grappling to joint locking to throws, and then your stand-up stuff. I always like mixing that stuff up. To me, even if you go to compete, and there's certain rules in those competitions, being able to think like that, to work through all those different things, just makes you better at any level of sparring that you're competing in. The harder and more complex the sparring you practice, when rules happen to be applied to it for different tournaments, the easier, in my opinion, it tends to be to follow those different kinds of rules. But I also like, Dr. Leach, particularly what you were talking about, and I don't think I expressed quite what I meant. I think when I said earlier, when I mentioned no contact, light contact, a lot of people get confused. Some days we talk about no contact, light contact, moderate contact in here. And what I say by that, usually it takes the beginning students a little bit to get used to this, but what I mean by no contact or light contact does not mean slow. It means going as hard and as fast as you can, but trying to reverse and stop those muscles, much as Miss Borch was just talking about. So I know I always have, it takes a little while for new students here to get used to that. When I start a drill or start a sparring class and I say, okay, we're going to do some light contact stuff, and the first thing you see is everybody moving slow. And I was like, no, that's not what I meant. Light contact, move fast, throw kind of hard. You pull it before it reaches there. So slow and controlled. Also, I didn't mean to offend anybody if they do different stuff, or if they came up in Kyokushin to different stuff. The only school I have experience with in Kyokushin, I did not actually train there. It's a school here not too far away. They're really, really good friends of mine. They're great people. But the only kind of competition they do, and I was going to do a competition with them just recently, they only do what they call semi-contact, and then they have full contact. And basically their definition is that both are pretty much the same thing. The only difference is in semi-contact you're allowed to wear protective gear. A base head guard with no shield, gloves and foot pads and shin guards, and it was the same rules. They didn't allow punches to the head, only to the body. Kicks could go to the leg. You could do takedown though, and kicks could go to the head. And now in their full contact version, which is what I was supposed to have competed in, you could get knocked out. They did allow knockouts in that. In fact, I had one student who absolutely insisted on doing it, even after we had went to a special training and another instructor had accidentally done some damage. That's when I was nursing a broken rib a little while back, and I'd had some damage done there, was from that training for that particular fight. So I had to miss the fight due to my rib, but he insisted on continuing to do it anyway. Unfortunately, he went up against the same very highly experienced person that I had trained with, and ended up, he did get knocked out. But he's okay now, by the way, but that's just the only experience I've had with the Kyokushin guys. But also, I want to go, this is going way back in the conversation, but Ms. Borge, I wanted to go back to that. I very much agree with you, and I thank you for saying that about, the sparring, using the term sparring versus fighting. For the first 2 years my school was open, I was very huge about that, and I would say, if fighting gets the wrong idea, the wrong impression. I mean, in a way, we're learning how to fight in different ways, but what we're actually doing when we practice is not a fight. It's a controlled match. It's a controlled fight. So I like using the term sparring, but I have caught myself recently using it out of turn on that. It's just started to become a habit, partly from some marketing stuff and different things like that. And the last thing I wanted to bring up about the no contact, for anyone out there still saying, oh, that's worthless practice or whatever, if you're still thinking that, you know as well as I do that when you are using contact, whether light, medium, hard contact, all full contact, whatever, that there has to be a certain level of penetration and there has to be a certain level of hitting. But if you overthrow or overguess that amount of penetration and you overthrow that technique and it misses, or they dodge, or they manage to block you in just such a way, and you're already overbalanced, that they can finish overbalancing you super, super quickly. And one of the things no contact will teach you is exactly what your range and distancing is, exactly how far it is for that technique from point A to point B, and be able to tell your distancing with your eyes. They can also help you when you go into full contact or in any contact to not over penetrate your strike or overthrow your strike to throw yourself off balance. I know like around here in the point sparring divisions at a lot of our tournaments, they still allow boot-to-boot sweeps here. And I had one guy that he wanted to do a tournament at white belt from the day one he walked in. He's now been with me about a year and a half. He does really good at tournaments now, all kinds of tournaments. He does Olympic style and different things. But he it was one of his biggest problems at first is he would overthrow a cross, particularly on his right side, every time. And 9 times out of 10, he'd get that front foot swept out from under him, and he would face plant on the other side. So know your distancing, and that was the drills I gave to him. I gave to him a bunch of no contact drills, and pretty soon he wasn't overthrowing himself anymore. It was really a great thing for him. That was all I had to add.
I did have just a couple more topics, and first of all, thanks, Mr. Rose. I think those were really some excellent points that you made there. I want to encourage folks that are watching this episode tonight is that if you're practicing in one style, you know, it could be anything. It could be capoeira, it could be taekwondo, kung fu, karate, etc. I challenge you to get out there and partner up with another school or teacher or group of people that are studying a completely different style than you are. And the reason for this is because often you'll find that if you just stay sparring with people in your same system, you kind of understand how they spar, and so you're going to defend yourself a certain way. And it just doesn't help you to become better at sparring. I'll give you an example. I've got some friends of mine that are very heavily into Muay Thai. In fact, one of them even moved to Thailand to practice there. And we got together at an event not too long ago, and we decided to get together and do some sparring. Well, I had never actually sparred or taken any form of Muay Thai, so I was curious how it was going to work out. Well, one of the things I noticed, and for you Muay Thai people that are out watching this today, you'll probably chuckle at this, but one of the things I noticed is that they have some excellent leg kicks. I mean, they can get a kick into the thigh, to the knee, low kicks, I mean, so fast. And for me, that was excellent because we're so used to, when we spar, kicking above the belt. Okay, so you're not used to, if you spar on a regular basis in karate, you're not used to having those kicks come low all the time and come in fast and low. And so it really was a great experience for me. I learned to protect my lower body a lot better. And in turn, I think they learned that, you know, you can do more than just kick to the lower level. I threw out some spinning kicks and some spinning back fist on them, and that seemed to work well on my end. So, you know, just something, I'm just throwing it out as an example, but if you want to become better at sparring, you really need to get out there and spar with people that are a different skill level and a different art than you are. It'll really open your eyes. The other thing I wanted to bring up is kids in sparring. And by kids, I'm talking about 15 and younger. So, you know, once you get 16, at least in the systems that I've practiced, you can't become a black belt until you're age 16 in the systems I'm in the more traditional arts, because we have a belief, and this is probably a whole other topic, but we have a belief that, you know, you have to be able to defend yourself against an average size male in order to be qualified to even be a black belt. So, I mean, you could be a high brown, but you could never actually reach black. So my thoughts is that if you're age 15 or younger, the type of sparring you do should be very light to no contact. It really bothers me when I go and I watch tournaments or we participate in tournaments, and I see these kids and instructors encouraging them to hit harder, to hit, you know, target areas full force. And to me, kids are still growing, and if you're encouraging your students or anyone to hit full contact at that age, then, you know, you're risking some damage. And I know it's martial arts, and I know that, you know, there's going to be accidents that happen, But I found that there are some folks out there who may not understand that some of the things that can really happen if you do a full-on kick or a punch to an actual target area. And for those of you that are into sparring, I also challenge you to go out and learn what are some of the repercussions of actually making full-on contact to those target areas that you learn about in the martial arts. And you can look them up in medical books or talk to a doctor and ask them what would happen if that's hit. What would it do if somebody hit you full on to the solar plexus? And I know Dr. Leach could probably give you a few examples of what some of these target areas could do. And so I cringe when I go to these tournaments and I see kids just wailing on each other and a judge not calling it as too heavy. So just something to consider. And I hope that you guys take that to heart, because I'd like the future of the martial arts to be one in which it's for everyone. But I also think it's important for everyone to have control and to be able to carry on the martial arts in the traditional form as we've learned it. So I'm going to hand this over. If there's any more comments, I'd like to hear from each of you before we go tonight as to what you feel the future of sparring should be, or what's your vision for the future.
I'd like to just follow up on some of the things you said, because I think it's important. Younger people don't have the capacity to actually hit and strike with their hands that we would like to see them have. But because up until the age of 17, 18, the joints in their fingers and hands are still growing. And damage to these hands and breaking boards or sparring or hitting can cause some serious growth issues and can cause arthritis later on in life. And this is important that we do have control, and that we don't damage ourselves and damage our hands and knees and those kinds of things. I liked Master Borich's thoughts about sparring different people in different styles. I think that's an excellent idea. But it's a tough thing to do. And tough things to arrange, but in all the years of my sparring within the school I went to, there was never, ever an injury in sparring. I recall no injuries. And understand, we allowed the black belts contact, and we allowed low kicks, and we allowed throws, and we allowed pins, and we allowed chokes. And if you saw the opening, you took it, and it was controlled, and it was totally controlled. And the instructor, Kaito Mead, would on occasion call a point, but he would never stop the match unless two people were grappling on the floor and they weren't getting anywhere. Then he'd call it off, break it up, and then they'd start over from the standing position. And that's the only interference, the only time, or if somebody was getting too close to a wall, too close to a window or something like that, or a mirror where they might get hurt. We'd stop the match, bring them back to the middle, and then they go again. So control to me is the main issue. Control. It's an absolute must. And the only way you gain this is to start with no contact and over a period of time. As you go through the belts, you are expected in your daily training to increase that amount of control by decreasing the amount of distance between your attacking tool and your opponent's vital point. And that's the way you develop that kind of control. And yes, you can use it on bags, and it's safe there, but you need to just slowly march in until you can do that full force punch. You can touch that dough buck, you can pop that dough buck, or you can touch the tip of your chin with a full force blow and retract it, and just touch the chin. Just touch the chin. That's control, and that's what we're looking for. Now, they say as you do as you train, and this is true, but that's why we've got bag work, and that's why we use bags. Yeah, you need to know what it's like to hit something solid, and hitting a human being is not like hitting a bag. The bag offers much more resistance, but it's a good workout. It allows you to feel resistance, and it will tell you what it's like to hit something. But the human being is not going to react the same way as the bag does either. So I will turn it back over to you, Master George. Whatever. Okay.
You guys do bring up some fantastic points there about control, and that is something that I feel like is kind of lost a little bit here and there. I don't know why I wasn't reminded of this earlier, but I had a conversation not all that long ago with another person who was, I didn't know them. They called me up to offer to sell me a bunch of equipment, and it turned out they were closing their school down, or they were working on closing their school down. And they aren't the only people I've talked to that were in this situation. And I talked to other people around the area that knew them, and I said, yeah, they're great people, they're great teachers, it's a great school. And so it just kind of made me wonder. I was like, well, if it's so great, the location's good, then what was the problem? And when I sat down and talked to them, and they aren't the first people I've talked to with this issue, contact and lack of control was the problem. People were scared to train at their school because in their wanting to be such a legit martial arts school, and in their wanting to be respected in the fighting arts so much, they didn't talk about control. They didn't do much with control, and they went hard all the time. And that's what'll happen, though, is you get a few students here and there who don't mind going hard. One or two of those gets injured, they're out for 6 months, and then all the new people come in, and the worse it gets, the harder it gets, or I'm sorry, the scarier it gets for them, or the more they get hurt, the less they want to do it. And eventually there's no money to keep the school going again. So to talk about it from a financial standpoint, there is that. And that being said, there are a lot of talks around there. I think we've all probably heard the term McDojo and whatever else. And I think there's always that little bit of pressure as a school owner, as an instructor, to not be one of those schools, or not be conveyed as one of those schools. And one of the first things I think that tends to go in a lot of schools that are worried about being seen that way is that controlling the sparring in their classroom and teaching it with control and all that. But like Dr. Leach said, I mean at our school or any of the schools I was coming up through, I think I was the only person that ever got injured, and my injuries related to like broken pinky toe, stuff I did to myself, who had nothing to do with anybody else or the training method, just things I had happened to do. So it is important, and it just goes back to that definition Master Borch brought up a minute ago between sparring and fighting. Yes, we are practicing to learn how to fight, but you don't practice by straight up fighting. If that's the way we did things at all times, then the only people who would be training would be people who were already inclined to be starting or participating in fights to start with. And yet that's not what we're supposed to be about as martial artists. I think a lot of us talk about that. But the only people who are going to stay at a school like that are the people who are already want to fight, who already are involved in that sort of lifestyle, and that makes it so that we can't help others. We can't build confidence and things like that. And truly, if it's a person that is already in that mode, what are you helping them with other than maybe a little bit of anger management by letting them beat on everybody else in class? You're not helping them learn anything to become a better person. You're not helping them learn better control, how to control their emotions and how to control themselves. That kind of lesson only really comes from, like has been said 50 times in this episode, starting with some no contact stuff, learning that when you are training, you are not trying to hurt your partner. You're trying to push your partner. You're trying to get better. You're trying to help them get better. But you are not trying to hurt your partner. The more partners you hurt, the less people are going to want to train with you. Now, that being said, I know a lot of other schools that maybe go a little too far the other side on this, where there's always that balance. You always got to find that middle ground, because there are some people out there that go that have these huge school rules about sparring. You know, all schools have rules about sparring, but I mean some that maybe are a little bit far on the other side, where they're not really learning how fast it really is, where they're always going slow, they're always half speed, things like that. Now, we haven't talked about that at all today. We've been talking about going full speed, just less or no contact. But I'll tell you how we do ours. I don't have any set rules in our school when it comes to sparring. I mean, I'll set different types of rules or different parameters for the sparring classes. But when it comes to contact, when we're already doing contact sparring, I mean, we kind of split it where we go no contact or contact. But when we're doing contact sparring, I make it an exercise with my students in their own humility and in their own leadership skills when they're with students who maybe aren't to the level that they are, to feel out your own partner and communicate with your partner, knowing that you're not trying to hurt your partner, they're not trying to hurt you, but ask them how hard they want to be pushed. Tell them, hey, I need you to back off a little, or hey, you can step it up with me a little bit, whatever the case may be, because I want to go a little bit harder. And then just push your opponent or push your partner just a little bit more and a little bit more. When you do this, injuries are highly unlikely. You know, and you're not putting anybody in a panic situation. You're just pushing each other to get better. So I recommend, instead of necessarily making everybody play by exactly the same rules all the time, I personally recommend the way we do here in saying communicate with your partner, know who you can go a little harder with, who you need to go way softer with, who can you go fast with where they'll be able to still react. And I say this is very important. A black belt, in my system, we talk about black belts means spreading the seeds for the future. And as a black belt, when you come back, or as a advanced belt, when you come back and you're working with a lower rank, and you just go as fast as you can, it doesn't matter if you're hitting them or not. Even if you're not hitting them, that's very scary to them. And they only know 5 techniques, and they don't have a clue how to get those techniques in through all your speed. So who you can go fast with, who you need to slow down with, who you need to encourage, and how, when you are encouraging, to point out at what times breaking of your timing and rhythm and when to throw specific techniques. I think all these things are really, really important. But now, in my opinion, there should not be any sparring-related injuries when it comes to school. Can there be some hurts, some ouches? Yeah, we get a few of those from time to time. Nice numb leg here and there when we're doing some low kicks, you know, maybe a bruise here and there on the body or whatever. But should there be any injuries, if at all possible? No. If your partner's going a little bit too hard, just ask them to back it down. Go as hard as your partner's willing to. You will always be able to then have your next partner next time who may go harder with you if you really want to go hard. That's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. I really like that. I like how you encourage the partners to take control of the situation, and I definitely am going to use that with my own students. That's a great piece of advice. So with that, we're going to go ahead and put a bow on it and call episode 7 a close and a wrap. I appreciate all of you sitting here and watching our show. If you're watching the recording, be sure to put some comments below. We love to hear from you. If there's a topic that you'd like to hear us discuss, or perhaps you would like to be a guest on one of our shows, be sure to submit an email or write a comment below, and we'll get in touch with you. So have a great night, and we'll see you on the next episode of Marshall Way Network. Take care.